French philosopher and scientist who lived, well, he was born in 1623 and died in 1662. So he lived only 39 years. So, and nevertheless, he became, well, so important figure that we can deliver lectures on him. And I think that every course of philosophy should contain a lecture on Blaise Pascal. Well, we had already lectures on Galileo, on Bacon, on René Descartes, and now Blaise Pascal. So he can be compared with these philosophers, and we can say perhaps in what sense he's an original thinker. Yes, Blaise Pascal. Yes. In what sense he's an original thinker? Well, he started as an experimentalist, and in this he resembles Galileo and Bacon. Well, he designed the experiments on measuring atmospheric pressure on different heights, because he was sure that these Torricelli experiment, when the mercury rises in a tube, it depends, the height of this column of mercury depends on atmospheric pressure, and atmospheric pressure decreases with height. So if you measure atmospheric pressure, say on on a mountain which is, say, 1,000 feet high, so you will have less figure for atmospheric pressure, which means that the length of this column of mercury will be less than if we measure atmospheric pressure, say, in at the foot of the mountain. Okay, so this is this was a thought experiment for Pascal, because he asked his uncle to make the measurements. He himself didn't make them. He only invented this experiment. So this was, with Pascal, it was a thought experiment. But he gave instructions to his uncle, and he managed to confirm that the hypothesis of Pascal. Also, Pascal is known for other developments in hydrostatics. For example, we all know, I think, the law of Pascal, that the pressure is which is exerted in one point of the liquid is passed by the liquid to all other points. Well, we can say that there is a so-called, we can sort of expand this law on sociology, and we can say that if, say, a terrorist attack happens in one point of the world, in one place, it exerts the same influence on all the inhabitants of the earth. So this is sociological expansion or sociological variant of Pascal's law. If we consider all humans to be a certain liquid, so if you injure one human being, you injure the whole human race. Well, that will we speak later when we will discuss Auguste Comte and his religion of humanity. It will happen when we'll come to the 19th century. Well, now still I think it deserves attention. But of course, Pascal didn't think about sociology. He developed this law for hydrostatics, for liquids. Well, so he was a promising scientist, and perhaps people expected something new from him, that he will continue his experiments and become a good physicist in the sense in which Galileo was a good physicist and made experiments and observations. Also, maybe people expected that Blaise Pascal would implement the Baconian formalism, the Baconian ideas of experimental science, of empirical and inductive approach to nature. But something happened with Pascal. Well, people say that it was a certain accident which happened when Pascal was 31 years old. It was in 1654. The date, well, we don't know exactly what happened. So according to rumors which circulated among his relatives, there was an accident while crossing the river. So two horses started to panic, and they sort of tried to move the whole carriage into the river. But the first two horses fell, and their reins were torn, and so other four horses remained. So all in all, there were 6 horses. So 2 horses fell and 4 horses remained. So Pascal was on the verge of being thrown, his carriage being thrown into the river, and he was afraid that, well, he was on the verge of imminent death. So maybe this accident badly produced a bad impression on him, somehow traumatized him. We don't know exactly. But what we know is that on the day of 23rd of November, he wrote a certain parchment or document on parchment on, well, it's like pergamon, or just a type of paper, or not paper, just there was a paper made out of a skin. Well, this called, well, just here also wrote it on paper, November. So 1654. So he underwent a certain mystical experience, and he of course hid it from everybody, but he decided to write down what sort of thoughts that came to him during this mystical experience, and in this way he kept it on his breast, and after his death a servant found on his breast a little bag with this parchment, and on that it was written, well, it was one sort of sheet of, well, parchment. I will just look at it. Maybe I'm writing it correctly. Well, parchment, yes, I'm right. This is a well, if there's difficulties with this word, I can give you the definition from Cambridge Dictionary. Or Ojaswini, is there a difficulty with parchment? So yes, I think there is some difficulty, so I will just find it. Parchment paper. Well, but I'm not sure it's exactly this thing. Maybe there's another meaning of this. I will see parchment. Oh, the thin dried skin of some animals that was used. Okay, this I think this one is better. It's a skin. I'm sorry. The thin. Well, maybe. Oh, okay. I will just write this one. Yes, here you see the thin dried skin of some animals. Parchment. Okay. See the chat. Well, this is not cellulose-based paper. It is another. You see, Isaac, this is the thin dried skin of some animals that was used in the past for writing on, or maybe high quality paper resembling the, well, the skin. So this is, well, why did he use that? Because he was afraid that a simple paper will sort of, you know, when we take the simple paper, if we just put it into water, the writing, the letters can disappear. So he kept this parchment in this little sack, which he wore under his shirt. So, well, what was written there? A certain, well, it was a certain text which can be regarded as the, well, sort of like a conspect or writing down of some mystical experience. And it started with with words that became famous. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not of philosophers and scientists. Isaac and Jacob, not of philosophers and scientists. Well, it was written in French, of course. I translated into English. Well, but of course it is translated into many languages. So what does he mean by this enigmatic phrase? He meant perhaps that philosophers and scientists have a different idea of God. You remember God of, say, of René Descartes. It was God who is like prime mover. So he gave the first impetus to all creation, and then he was not much needed. He could as well disappear or remain sort of in rest. So after this first impetus, or after this first momentum which God gave to the whole world, then things could move by themselves because of this principle of inertia. So you just move a thing or just so start the clock, and the clock will continue to work, okay? So it doesn't need constant attention. Also the computer, you just make it, you just put some software, and then the computer will work by itself, okay? It doesn't need to be repaired if it is done properly, okay? So it was understood that God make his perfect job, and that the world has no need of continuous repair by God. Well, it is not exactly so. I have told you that for Descartes, God was also important in sort of connecting soul with body, because soul is immaterial and body is material and extended. So to connect these two different things, some miracle is needed. And this miracle is provided by God's continuous presence, or so-called concursus. Concursus is concourse, I think. Concourse. I will just look it there. Concourse. Well, these difficult words, yes, but they are present in English language. Concourse. No, this is not so. I will just try this one. Well, in English, they have this concursus. Well, this is the same as collision. I will concursus, yes, just the same. Concursus. This is defined as the influx of divine causation upon secondary causes. So you see that in this way God was needed, because otherwise there would be no connection between our soul and our body. But that's all. God is not performer of miracles. Miracles are not needed. And it seems that for René Descartes, the life of prayer or contemplation or church going was not necessary. He lived all his life in the Protestant Holland, where there were no churches, and he didn't visit the parish priest. Only when he died in Stockholm, he decided to visit the priest, and before his death, he invited the priest, just to his deathbed. So he was not a perfect Christian. He was not a mystic. With Pascal, it was quite the other way around. After this vision, or maybe after that accident with horses, so he sort of got religion very deep in his heart and stopped doing science. So he was very much interested in this topic, why people think so little about God, about death, about religious subjects. So what's happening with man? And he wanted to write an apology of Christian religion, apology, which he didn't finish. Some papers were found with a preparation for this work, which remained unfinished, were found by his sister in his room. So what did sister decided to do? She decided to publish it. So it is not a single book with a just general idea. This is a collection of different thoughts. And so the sister of Pascal decided to call it thoughts. Well, in French, they're called pensées. because pensée, pensée is pensée is in French thought. So so this is like well, collection of different uttering sentences on different subjects. Well, most of them are interesting and became like classical. For example, thinking read. Thinking read. What is that? Reed is a kind of a plant. Ojasvini. Yes, reed. Maybe you have reeds in India. Reeds. Yes, you have. Yes. Well, I don't hear you very well. Maybe you are far from a microphone, Ojasvini. Or there's bad connection. Ah, okay. So weak plants. Well, reeds are also, well, I can give you a definition. I will find it. Reed.
Yeah, we have it.
Any of very tall grass
Pakistan, but we have it.
plants
I
are
have seen
often
this.
prominently joined stems that grow especially in wet areas. Okay. Just here is. So it's like a certain plant. Okay. So now, why did he call human or a man a thinking reed? That means that he is very slender in his constitution, and he adds a little drop of poison can kill him. A little drop of poison can kill him, but so he's very weak. He's slender, as and this in this way he can be compared with a reed, but he's a thinking reed, and while thinking he can comprehend the universe. Okay, so there's a paradox that he's weak and at the same time strong, that because his intellect can just sort of contain the whole universe, and in certain extent even God, because the idea of God is present in our also in our soul, in our brain. So well, of course we do not know everything, but we have the picture of the world, or we can say we have the like well, in German they say Weltanschauung, or in Russian they say мировоззрение, but in English we can say the world idea, the concept of the world, how or just we can say well, I will try to find it, or we can say it. Worldview, yes, it escaped my memory. So you can have worldview, worldview. So being a thinking reed, nevertheless you have worldview. So you have the whole world before your mental eye. Well, this is one famous metaphor which Pascal uses. The second important metaphor is that there are reasons of the heart of which reason don't even imagine. So reasons of the heart, reasons of the heart. What is that? Why do this heart appears in the same century in which Harvey found the blood circulation? So it seemed that, for example, for René Descartes, that our heart is just a pump, okay? Pump. I think it's, you know, pump, yes? Pump with which you can sort of deliver gasoline, for example, to your car, okay? So our heart is just a pump. It delivers not gasoline, but it delivers blood to our organs. So there's nothing mysterious in the heart, according to Harvey and according to René Descartes. So, but for Pascal, the heart is still something mystical. It is the center of emotions, like in India, I think also. I think, Ojaswini, do you regard in Indian thinking heart as something special? Yeah. Yes, I think in every tradition, in Christian tradition, you see, blessed are those who have pure heart, okay? Yes, pure heart. What does it mean? Not that this pump is working very well. It's not about the pump. It's not about blood circulation. It's about intentions. It's about the center of personality. When they say, blessed are the pure-hearted, or those with a pure heart, it means that they have pure intention, they have goodwill, okay? So this is not about the pump. Well, the same when Pascal says that there are reasons of the heart of which reason have no idea. So this is also a hint on some subconscious life. So you see that we are not all that we do is conscious. We have some unconscious reasons. But if, say, Freud will speak about unconscious area or subconsciousness as a storage of instincts, of wild desires, of sexual impulses, then with Pascal, this is not the same thing. Heart is not subconsciousness of Sigmund Freud. Heart of Pascal is a center of human personality where you can find well, for example, faith. Faith. So faith, it just means meaning of life. Because science as itself, say, experiments on atmospheric pressure, on hydrostatics, cannot give you the idea of the purpose of life. So the idea of love or the idea of faith. So all these ideas reside in the heart, not in the reason. So that's how we can explain this idea that there are reasons of the heart. So the heart has its own reasons. So the heart is somehow also thinking, but it is not thinking as René Descartes' consciousness, cogito ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am. Well, the heart cannot, it doesn't think in syllogisms. It's thinking in other categories, in the category of faith, purpose, love, hope. So this is what resides in the heart. Okay? And reason cannot understand that. For reason, it seems, well, either nonsense or something emotional. He doesn't understand what is faith, for example. What is hope? What is charity? Well, for reason, it's all incomprehensible. So you remember when we spoke about René Descartes, he wrote the book Meditations on First Philosophy. There were meditations on God, there were meditations on doubt, there were meditations on truth and false, but there were no meditations on faith, hope, and charity. So all these things remained out of scope of René Descartes' philosophy. Well, you remember Descartes also wrote a book on the passions, but passions he understood as emotions which are somehow driven by our brain, not by heart. Heart does not, we cannot find this category of heart with René Descartes, because for him the human body is just an extended organism, like a machine, kind of a machine. He even thought that animals were machines, because animals cannot think, cannot comprehend themselves, do not have consciousness as humans. So animals are just automats, okay? And our body is also like a machine. So only all this spiritual activity is somewhere in the soul, and the soul is connected with our body through the brain, not through the heart. And the heart is just a pump. Okay, so now with Pascal, this the other way around. He thinks, well, of course, when he's speaking about the heart, he doesn't understand just the organ. This is a more mystical concept. So heart is also can be regarded as a noblest part of human soul, not just, but it's somehow connected with all the body and with heart also. So body is not to be despised according to Pascal. So body is also something sacred, and this makes philosophy of Pascal very different from the philosophy of Descartes. Well, another idea which is associated with Pascal is the idea of wager. It's called Pascal's wager. Wager, what is that? Wager is a kind of a play when we are not certain, we can bet. Yes, like a bet. Well, you know this, the verb to bet. I bet you are, say, I bet you are mistaken, okay? I can say, well, bet, wager. So we are just, we're not sure in our judgment, and so we can sort of take a certain side in a certain argument without having convincing arguments in favor of our position. But that's enough of this probable position, this probable arguments are enough for us to take a stand, sort of in some difficult question, which we are unable to solve logically, how to say, with a sufficient logical clarity. Here's also the difference between Descartes and Pascal. You remember how insistent was Descartes on clarity. So we shouldn't take as a basis of our judgment something that is not sufficiently clear. Otherwise, we risk that all our mental construction will be erroneous. Okay, so we have to carefully judge about the how to say. He says that our main suppositions, our main basic notions or basic judgments or sentences should be clear and should be clearly true. So we should not be doubting in the truthfulness of these main propositions. Otherwise, everything will be put in doubt, okay? But with Pascal, it is not so. Pascal understands that main articles of faith of Christian faith, for example, cannot be proved with exactness. We cannot be very sort of convinced in, or say, logically convincing proof of these assertions. That's what the faith differs from, say, knowledge. And well, René Descartes speaks about knowledge, and Pascal speaks about faith. So what's the difference? Faith is probable. We cannot demonstrate with enough certainty the articles of the faith. Nevertheless, with our heart, we embrace them, but not with our mind. So what our mind can say only that it is probable, but mind is not convinced. So what we are to do? According to Descartes, we should leave these things which are dubious, which are doubtful, we should leave them alone and never study them. So that's why René Descartes stayed away from all theological debates of his century, because he said, well, I'm not a theologian and I'm not competent here, so I cannot say anything about, say, the Eucharist, for example. Well, and you remember later some of his books were put on the index, even because of that Descartes didn't clarify his position in relation to church sacraments. For example, Eucharist. You remember that for Descartes, bread and wine are extended things. So how can they change miraculously into the body and blood of Christ if everything material is extension? So if we take away extension, we seem to take away matter at all. So there was a Cartesian philosophy was in blatant contradiction with, say, some very important articles of Catholic faith. That's why Descartes was regarded with suspicion. And with Pascal, this is quite another way around. Pascal puts faith first and not doubt. Okay, so it's different. Well, now we have less than 1 minute, so we'll again use the same link, Jaswini, yes? Just to continue. Okay, so I will get out of it and then use the same link to continue. Existence of God that is important, but the proof of God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because he was not content with this idea of God as a prime mover or an organizer of all things. Because about this God, we cannot be sure that he loves us, for example, cares for us, and arranges his providence on just to make us happy. This is not clear. God the Creator could be indifferent towards simple humans. And you remember with Spinoza, God is somehow just, oh, we didn't speak about Spinoza yet. Isaac. I've forgotten.
Yes,
No.
yes, we have not spoken.
No, we haven't.
We only made mention of him in one of the class.
We have not been yet speaking about Spinoza, yes?
We made mention of him in one.
Yes, but we didn't
we have not
deliver a whole lecture to Spinoza. That will be, I think, our next lecture. So, but I just can say that this idea of God somehow united with all the creation, with all the world, it means that God is not a person. God is somehow everything. It's called pantheism. So God is somehow present everywhere. And so we cannot just sort of ask, well, how to say, pray to God as to a person. For Pascal, this was unacceptable. He wished his God to love him, like it was in the Holy Scriptures. You remember that Abraham spoke with God face to face, sort of. And God answered him. And when there was question about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, these two cities, Abraham even wanted to intervene before God in favor of these cities. And he said, well, perhaps there will be 50 righteous men in these cities, maybe you will spare these cities because of that 50 righteous men. And God said, yes, I would spare if I will find 50 righteous men in these cities. And then Abraham continued to argue with God, but maybe if 5 will be lacking, still can you spare them for 45? And God said, well, I spare for 45 also. So they continued to argue in this way until they came to 10 righteous people. And then God stopped talking with Abraham. So this was like a talk, like I'm talking with you, or people are talking like I'm talking with my wife or with my mother or with my daughter. You know, this is just personal relations. That's what Pascal wanted. And he was, of course, his eyes were sufficiently open to understand that it is difficult, even impossible, to prove it like evidently. This evidence is lacking, okay? You remember later we'll speak that Bertrand Russell, a famous English philosopher, he said that what he needs in order to believe in God is evidence. And when they asked him, Bertrand, if you will die and see God in the next life, what would you say to him? Why didn't you believe him on earth? And Bertrand Russell jokingly said, I will say, not enough evidence, God, not enough evidence. Okay, this is the problem of evidence. And of course, Pascal was no less clever than Bertrand Russell, and he, of course, understood that this evidence is lacking. But he supplied this evidence by the reasons of the heart, by his faith. And that made him exceptionate in this sort of, among other philosophers of the 17th century. So neither with Bacon, nor with Descartes, nor with Spinoza will we find this idea of personal God who is sort of entering into very personal, intimate relations with man. So only in Pascal we find this kind of mysticism. And of course, Pascal was somehow frustrated here because at a certain moment he felt that he is in God's presence. But then again, sort of a night of a soul entered, and he was also always doubting. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it was just a dream, or it was just a special state. So how can I be sure? And in one of his also thoughts, we can find this passage that, I am a miserable man because I cannot find enough evidence to believe firmly. But when I want to not to believe, there are still some evidences that hamper me to be an unbeliever. So I'm somehow in between the faith and atheism. So there are too much evidence in this world that so that I can remain an atheist. So because there are some evidences of God's presence, but there are not enough of them to make me a firm believer. So I'm always in a certain uncertainty, you know, and that made his life tragic. So he was not like, he couldn't find some inner peace there, because he wanted to somehow to write this convincing apology of Christian religion, and he understood that this evidence was lacking, and that perhaps people who will read his thoughts, they will not give, how to say, not agree with him, with his way of argument. So they will not find his arguments convincing. That's why he suggested this idea of wager. Wager, it means that you should bet, or you should take like a decision to put on stake your life, your money, your love, your attention, put on stake as if God exists, okay? So it's like a play where you take, like put some money on the stake. You understand? Yes, put on stake, yes? No. This is when you're playing cards, for example, or poker, or some other play, when you just pronounce that you will, in case you win, you will win a certain amount of money, but in case you lose, you will lose the same amount. So you are risking your money, okay? Now what we are doing here, we are risking our life, because if we will find out that God does not exist, then all our sort of efforts to believe in him, to lead a life of abstinence or of prayer, that all will be futile, because we will not be recompensated for that. So according to Pascal, life is a risky affair, so we can lose everything. But the atheist who is not thinking about God also is at risk to lose everything, because if he will eventually find God, so he will be in a position of a loser, okay? Because it will, and nobody can be certain enough that God does not exist, okay? So this uncertainty in this question, it sort of creates in man a certain fear that perhaps he's mistaken in his atheism, and also it creates fear, on not a fear, but like a certain feeling of perhaps my life I was spent erroneously. I could have gained much more pleasure or comfort from this life if I were not thinking about God too much, okay? So Pascal was somehow torn between these two alternatives. Well, how he wanted to comfort himself in this situation? He invented, well, not invented, he took it from the Holy Scripture, this idea of a hidden God. Hidden God. So in Latin, it's Deus absconditus. Well, you can find it in the Latin translation of the Bible, Deus absconditus. Well, also it is Deus absconditus is also a title of a book about the Eucharist, because in Eucharist, according to Catholic faith, God remains hidden under the appearances of bread and wine. Okay, so this was very much discussed at that time. You remember that even some of the books of René Descartes were put on the index because of these polemics about the sort of real presence of God in Eucharist. So for Pascal, it was an article of faith. Of course, he understood that he couldn't prove it, not only to unbelievers, but even to Protestants who denied this real presence or transubstantiation. For example, Anglicans, they denied it. They didn't believe in it. So he understood the weakness of his position. But he said that, like, it's not an argument, of course, convincing, but it's like a metaphor that when we speak about God, all his actions are in certain extent hidden. For example, God created the world. So analyzing this world, its complexity, we can add much more today, the complexity of the DNA, of the cell, of human brain. All this complexity somehow leads us to the idea of God. But we cannot find God just as we can find, say, students listening to me, or as I can find my children or my wife or my mother. So this not sort of tangible, I cannot just touch God, okay? So I can only guess that perhaps he exists because of the complexity of nature that surrounds me. Well, if I take my life also, well, sometimes I can feel God's presence, but sometimes there are so many accidents, catastrophes, epidemics, and sudden deaths, which seem quite absurd. So you can be always tempted that the God doesn't care for humans, for men and women, because sometimes these accidents which happen with people seem so absurd, so so devoid of meaning, that you can doubt whether God cares for man in general. So he also remains in this way hidden. His providence is not obvious, okay? Now the same will happen with Christ. When he appeared on earth, he behaved like a say Jewish rabbi or Jewish teacher, okay? So he couldn't be recognized as something divine. And the Jews in Mass, and still now, they don't recognize Jesus as their Messiah, because they say, well, this man seemed like all other Jewish teachers, and his teaching was not messianic, because we see the fruits of it, that after his death of Jesus, there happened this uprising, and the Romans conquered us and sort of banished us from our land. So Jesus seemed to bring misery and not prosperity to Jewish people. So you see, there's a lot of arguments that if you speak with contemporary Jews in the synagogue, well, I'm not sure there are some Jews in Nigeria, for example, or in India. Well, but you can find them in Moscow, for example. Soon, in 2 days, the feast of Hanukkah will start with the Jews. So there's plenty of opportunities to speak with them. And they will say, well, we don't recognize Jesus as something special. Even maybe his teaching was noxious to our nation. Okay, so here also God remains hidden. And in the last example is this Eucharist, where we can see only bread and wine. We cannot see anything divine. So it also, God remains here also. This is I'm just describing popularly the thoughts of Pascal, okay? So unfortunately, they are too deep, and they will lead us to deep theological questions which we cannot afford to touch in detail, because the aim of our course is history and philosophy methodology of science. Well, we have, of course, this question. It was underlined in the program of our course that we will pay attention to ties or relations between philosophy, science, and religion. Okay, so Pascal is an ideal, I would say, subject for such talk. Okay, so if we want to speak in deeply about connections, possible connections between science and religion, then the case of Pascal is, I think, very eloquent. And so what some conclusions can we get out of this case? So was first conclusion which many people make is that religion sort of hampers or science. So Pascal was a good, promising scientist, but after he got interested in religion, he lost interest in science. So his like all his mental activity was concentrated now on religious subjects, and he didn't have enough time or energy or like disposition to continue his scientific work. Well, more or less the same situation happened with Newton, but Isaac Newton, he managed somehow to divide his energy and attention between science, alchemy, and religion, and history also. Isaac Newton wrote extensive commentaries to biblical books like the book of Daniel, the prophet Daniel, and the Apocalypse. So, and he also wrote chronology of the world history in dates. And he also studied alchemy. Also he studied the history of, say, of the primitive church, and he wanted to understand how the idea of Trinity was developed, because he thought this idea erroneous. He was an Arian. He didn't believe in the Trinity. And he had also to conceal his unbelief. So he was deeply immersed or engrossed in these theological debates. Well, of course, he kept something hidden, so not all his thoughts were revealed, and some of his books on religion were published only posthumously. But here also we have an example of a man who divides his attention between science and religion. But with Newton, he managed to find some compromise or equilibrium between science and religion, because for Newton, science could help religion. With Pascal, Pascal understood that science could be he said, divertisement. Okay, what is that divertisement? What do you have this word in English? Divertisement, to divert attention. Okay, so
diversion.
Yes,
it might be diversion.
Diversion, yes. That divertissement or divertissement is in French. I think yes, it's better diversion. Diversion, it's something that diverts your attention from what is essential for you. So because Pascal thought that religion is essential, because religion leads to spiritual life or spiritual death, then everything else, including science, is a diversion. So it's like a temptation, okay? So you should not concentrate on science, because while doing science, you can easily get interested or somehow become enthusiastic about it and forget about religion, forget about God. So with Pascal, it was this constant effort to continue thinking about theological subjects. And well, it was unusual with a scientist of his silence of his sort of well, we can say with such a talented scientist as he is, the scientist of the first rank, okay, first rank scientist like Pascal, because usually when people are successful in some of their enterprises, they continue because, well, first of all, they can say, this is my vocation. This is my vocation, that I'm a scientist because I am successful in science. And well, Pascal was a genius in mathematics, in probability theory, in also in calculation. So that's even the language which is called Pascal. So he created some devices that could make easy the computation. And also he was a genius in physics, in hydrostatics, and so on. So he was a promising scientist. And if Pascal just got this idea that science is his vocation, then he could continue. Well, continue to be a believing person. Like, you know, Martin Luther, he developed this idea of vocation, or in German, Beruf. So according to Luther, you can be a successful merchant, or a successful scientist, or a successful warrior, general, for example, and continue to be a successful Christian. Because it is, and if they say, well, how can you be a warrior, or a policeman, or a car driver, or a taxi driver, for example, or say a bank official, how can you sort of, how can you well, how can you continue to somehow combine these different these your occupations with your religion? But with Luther, there was no problem. Luther said, this is possible because this is your vocation, comes from God. God wants you to be a good taxi driver, or God wants you to be a good husband, or God wants you to be a good teacher of philosophy, so, or a good scientist, or God wants you to work to develop hydrostatics, or physics, or biology, or medicine. Okay, this is your vocation. So there's nothing, no contradiction between being a believer and having a profession and going in for science, or sports, or business, or anything. Well, with Pascal, it was not so. This can be explained because Pascal was under the influence of a certain movement within Catholicism, which is called Jansenism. Jansenism. Well, I will just give you the definition of it in Cambridge Dictionary, I think. Well, I don't know whether it has it, but maybe it has. Okay, Oxford Dictionary. So, Jansenist. Well, they don't have the definition. Oh, yes, I have it. Okay. Jansenism. Yeah, okay, very good. So I found it. Jansenism. What is that? Follow the chat. A Christian movement of the 17th and 18th centuries based on Jansen's writings and characterized by moral rigor and asceticism. See, that's the problem. So the problem with Pascal is that he got involved in a certain mystical Christian movement of French nobility, of French intellectuals, which was centered in a certain monastery which is called Port-Royal in Paris. Port-Royal. It comprised good logicians, also a famous dramatist, Racine, and other intellectuals. So he found himself, of course, at home here, because he was among the the intellectuals, the intellectual elite of Paris. It was very fashionable, this Jansenism, this movement, but it also demanded a lot of attention, because they discussed moral questions, moral theology, many other theological topics. Jansenism was even how to say, condemned. Some Jansenist theses were condemned by the Pope. So there was also discussion between the mainstream Catholics, between especially Jesuits. So it took a lot of mental energy to defend this radical opinion. You see, moral rigor and asceticism. So also asceticism. Pascal never married, never had a woman. Descartes was not married, but he had a woman, like a civil wife, with whom he had a daughter. Okay, Galileo also had illegitimate daughters and a son. He also never was in marriage officially, as in a Catholic marriage, but he had a mistress, we can say. So with Spinoza also never married, but about Spinoza we'll speak next time. So here was a kind of asceticism. Pascal never married and perhaps died a virgin. We don't know, but as far as we can see from the reminiscences of his sister, he was very strict in this way. Well, and so that perhaps explains his case, that he was not only a religious person, but he was an apostle of a certain religious movement. So he got involved in this apostolic activity, and also in this also in writing this apology of Christian religion, and perhaps he considered this to be a kind of a vocation. Okay, so this is a vocation of a religious philosopher. Okay, so he wanted to study in deep this problem of faith and reason. Okay, so I think this for me, I think it is very interesting. But some of my students, especially Russian students, they consider to be too onerous, you understand? Onerous. To study religion with such in such details, okay? You understand? Well, I think for Indians, for example, it is no problem, because your sacred books are very complex. Vedas, for example, or Upanishads, they are sort of, you understand Upanishadi, Ojaswini, what I mean?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Vedas and Upanishads.
Yes,
Yeah.
but if you read them, you will see that they are laden with, say, a very deep philosophy, okay? so you can be sort of spend your whole life commenting on them or meditating on them, okay? So Indian religion also demands the whole of man, okay? So Brahmins, they don't do anything but just study religion. The same with the Jewish, say, rabbis or Talmudists. They study their religion and they say, this is my vocation. I'm just commenting scriptures. With so what happened with Pascal, that he also was had this idea that Christian religion deserves whole man, whole attention. So you cannot sort of divide yourself between different occupations, science and religion. So either science or religion. So that was his personal conviction. And he remained true to it. And I think it led him to premature death. He died, I think, nervously exhausted. And in the 19th century, there was a certain psychiatrist, Louis Francois Leloux, I think. You can read his book in Gallica library. Well, I've copied it, but I've not read it fully. So this is a psychiatrist who wrote a book about Pascal, and he considers this is a French psychiatrist of the 19th century. He considers Pascal to be mentally suffering from some mental disorder, and he thought that this vision which Pascal saw and which he memorized in his so-called on this parchment, this memorial of so-called or amulet, as Voltaire called it. So this was a kind of a nervous breakdown or some hallucination, or you understand, this was like a fit of some psychiatric disease. And that's why it led to his focusing on the religion as an idea fixe, idea fixe. Well, this is when a person is sort of engrossed or has his attention concentrated only on one idea. So for psychiatrists, this is like a case of a mental disorder. Well, there appeared also the same psychiatrist wrote a book about Socrates. So this was his second book. He wrote a book, the first book he wrote about Socrates, the second book about Pascal. So you see that Socrates is also a strange personality, sort of not easily understood by rational analysis, because he had some demon, some voices, he heard some voices, okay? So this is not also, sounds not very sane. Well, so what we can say that Pascal is a kind of exceptional personality. But he was loved even by skeptics like Voltaire, who edited his, who wrote commentaries to his thoughts, Voltaire. We'll speak about Voltaire later, I think. And Friedrich Nietzsche, who called Pascal the only logical Christian. Nietzsche called Pascal the only logical, only one logical Christian. So all other Christians are illogical, okay? So only Pascal, but he, of course, he was in polemics with Pascal, but he sort of, had kind of esteem to Pascal, okay, Nietzsche. Well, we'll speak about, of course, Voltaire, Nietzsche, and Spinoza, and so we have a lot of things to discuss. But I think that when we'll speak about all these personalities, it is good to have before our mental eyes this exceptional, interesting philosopher who can be even regarded as a precursor of existentialism. Well, thank you for listening to me, and I hope we will meet next Tuesday, yes, Ojaswini?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now I will wish you goodbye and have a nice evening.
Thank
What-
you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Yes,
You
thank you,
too.
Riva. Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a nice